before time, the birth of the 9 worlds, before wind, before sky, before the turning of the stars, there was only a silence so ancient it could not be named. There was no sun, no moon, no time, only a vast, yawning void called Ginnungagap, a chasm deeper than thought, wider than breath, stretching beyond even the dreams of the gods who had yet to be born. It was neither light nor dark, neither warm nor cold. It simply was. To the north of this emptiness lay Niflheim, a land of perpetual frost and mist, swirling in a gray breath older than memory. From it flowed the rivers of ice, freezing and bitter, known as the Elivagar. Over countless eons, their poison hardened into glittering rime, pushing ever closer toward the gap. To the south was Muspelheim, a realm of fire and chaos, ruled by flame and roaring light. It was the opposite of Niflheim, in every way a place of unrelenting heat, of burning sparks leaping into Ginnungagap like stars tossed into darkness. At its heart stood Surtr, a giant of flame, sword blazing in his hand, watching in silence for the day his fire would devour the world. And between these two, between cold and fire, between breath and burn, Ginnungagap waited. Then came the first stirrings of creation, where frost from Niflheim met sparks from Muspelheim. The great gap began to change. The ice melted, the steam rose, and from the mist, life began to form. The first to emerge was a giant Ymir, the progenitor of the frost giants. He was massive, crude, formless in his strength. From the sweat of his armpits came the first of his kin. Twins born without mother, from one of his legs sprang another child. Giants multiply, vast and wild, shadows of chaos given shape. But Ymir was not alone for long. From the ice also emerged Audumla, a sacred cow of impossible size and quiet grace. Her udders fed Ymir with 4 rivers of milk. She lived by licking the salty rime of ice-covered stones. Day after day she licked, and from the stone she licked, something else began to emerge. On the first day, she uncovered strands of hair. On the second, a head. On the third, an entire body. This was Buri, the first of the gods. Buri was tall, golden, shining with order and clarity. He fathered a son named Bor, and Bor, in time, married Bestla, a giantess, daughter of Ymir's kin. Together, they had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These 3 brothers, born of both good and giant, would shape the fate of all worlds to come. The world was still young, and the giants were many. Ymir's children stretched across the land like mountains. Their footsteps cracked ice. Their voices shattered stone. But the sons of Bor looked upon Ymir and saw not a father, not a creator, but a threat. Ymir's dreams were chaos, his hunger endless. He spawned more giants, more darkness, more danger. And so the brothers made a choice that would divide all creation into before and after. Together, Odin, Vili, and Ve rose against Ymir. The battle was long and terrible. The void echoed with thunder. Rivers boiled. Mountains fell. In the end, Ymir was struck down. His blood surged from his body in a crimson flood, drowning all but one of his kin, a frost giant named Bergelmir, who escaped on a crude wooden ark with his wife. From him, the race of giants would continue. But Ymir was dead, and the gods had the corpse of a giant too big to bury, too powerful to ignore, so they used it. From Ymir's flesh, they shaped the land. From his blood, they made the seas and lakes. His bones became mountains, his teeth the cliffs and boulders, his skull massive and heavy. They lifted high above, forming the dome of the sky. To hold it up, they placed 4 dwarves at each corner of the world, naming them north, south, east, and west. From sparks that had flown out of Muspelheim, they fashioned the stars. The sun, the moon were caught and tamed. set on paths through the sky, chased by wolves who would forever hunger for their light. From Ymir's brain, the gods made the clouds, drifting across the newly formed heavens. The brothers looked upon their work, and it was not yet enough. So they built a world at the center of creation, Midgard, the realm of men. They crafted it as a fortress, surrounded by an endless ocean, with Ymir's eyelashes forming its mighty walls. And finally, from the trees along the shore, they created the first humans, Ask and Embla. From ash and elm, they breathed life into the man and woman, gave them form, gave them mind, gave them speech. Midgard was theirs, and it was beautiful. Above it all, the gods created Asgard, their own realm, a citadel in the sky, linked to Midgard by the shimmering rainbow bridge, Bifrost, and at the center of all creation, the spine that held it together, stood the great tree, Yggdrasil. Its roots wound through the 9 worlds. Its branches shaded gods and mortals alike. Its bark whispered with time. Beneath it sat 3 sisters, the Norns, weaving the fates of gods and men alike. Past, present, future order. Verdandi, schooled forever spinning, forever knowing, but never intervening. One root stretched to Asgard, where the gods drank wisdom from the sacred well. Another stretched to Jotunheim, land of the giants. The third plunged deep into the dark, to Niflheim, where the dragon Nidhogr gnawed endlessly at the root, waiting for the tree to fall. All things were now in place. The 9 worlds had formed. Asgard, realm of the gods. Midgard, realm of humans. Vanaheim, home of the Vanir gods. Jotunheim, land of the giants. Niflheim, the frozen abyss. Muspelheim, the land of fire. Alfheim, land of the light elves. Svartalfheim, realm of the dwarves. Helheim, domain of the dead. Each world spun on its own axis, yet tethered to the others by fate, by tree, by story. The gods watched from their high halls, their eyes full of purpose. But even now, in the silence of the dawn, they knew nothing lasts forever, not even the world they had built from the bones of a giant. For somewhere beneath the roots, something stirred. The death of Ymir, building the cosmos. Before there were gods as we know them, before names like Odin and Thor echoed across the winds, there was Ymir. Ymir was not a god. Ymir was not a king. Ymir was the beginning of chaos made flesh. He emerged from Ginnungagap, the yawning void between fire and ice, from the melting of rime and the heat of Muspelheim, massive, unshaped, eternal. From the sweat beneath his arms, more giants were born, creatures with voices like avalanches and footsteps, like mountains falling. He drank from the milk of Odhumla, the sacred cow, and as he drank, the world around him stirred. But the world was not yet world. There was only endless space, endless night, and in that silence, Audhumla licked the salty frost from the stones, day after day, and from that frost came something new. Not a giant, not chaos, but a man. His name was Buri, and from him came Bor, who wed the giantess Bestla, and bore 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These brothers looked at the world not with hunger, but with wonder. They watched the giants multiply loud, wild, ever hungry, and they saw that, left unchecked, the giants would fill everything with noise and ruin. They saw that the void would not birth order on its own, and so they made a choice, one born of necessity, one that would break the balance between fire and frost forever. They killed Ymir. It was not easy. Ymir was not a creature one could sneak upon. He filled Ginnungagap. His blood was a river before it spilled. His bones were the hills. His roar shook the edge of Muspelheim. But Odin, Vili, and Ve were not ordinary beings. They were born of fire and frost, and yet something else, something new. They struck with power that had never existed before. Power with purpose. Ymir fell, and with his fall, the world began. The blood of Ymir rushed out in a great wave, a red flood that drowned almost all of his kin. It filled Ginnungagap, it chased fire back to its realm, and froze the edges of Niflheim. Only Bergelmir, a distant frost giant, and his mate, escaped floating on a crude wooden box, clinging to survival. From them would rise the future of the Jotnar, the frost giants. But for now, all was still, and the brothers looked upon the corpse of Ymir, the vast, formless mass of chaos, and they began to build. First, they took his body and carved the earth. Flesh became soil, bones became mountains and crags. His teeth, once gnashing through stars, became boulders and cliffs. His hair, long and wild, was scattered to become forests, plains, and grasses. From his blood, they poured the seas and lakes, the rivers that would carve canyons and feed life. His skull they lifted into the sky, placing it like a great dome above the land. To hold it in place, they stationed 4 dwarves, Nordri, Sudri, Austri, and Vestri, at the 4 corners of the world, named for the winds they would command. The world now had shape, but it had no light, so the brothers turned to the embers of Muspelheim, catching the brightest of sparks and placing them high into the new sky. These became the stars, scattered carefully, like pinholes in the great curtain of night. But that wasn't enough. So Odin reached deeper, capturing 2 great flames, one golden and bright, the other pale and cool. From these, they shaped the sun and moon, assigning them orbits, so that day and night would rise and fall like breath to chase them. They unleashed 2 wolves, Skuld and Hati, children of Fenrir, who forever pursue sun and moon across the heavens. Fangs bared, howls echoing in dawn and dusk. Thus, time began. With the heavens set, they turned again to the land. They shaped Midgard, the middle realm, from Ymir's eyebrows, creating a vast ring of protective hills and cliffs to shield what would be the realm of men from the giants that still lingered beyond. Then they fashioned the sea, placing Midgard in its center, surrounded by churning waters and guarded by storms. But there were no people, no breath, no voice. So Odin, Vili, and Vi walked along the shore of Midgard, and there they found 2 trees, one ash, one elm. They shaped them into figures, and from the ash they made a man, strong, upright, bold. From the elm they shaped a woman, wise, supple, thoughtful. The gods breathed into them life, spirit, thought, and senses. They gave them names, Ask and Embla, and from them came the first humans. But the world could not stand alone. Above Midgard, they built Asgard, the home of the gods, high and radiant. It was a realm of golden halls and green fields, filled with laughter, war drums, and wisdom. Odin ruled there, alongside his wife Frigg, queen of foresight and silence. To connect the 2 realms, they forged Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, shimmering, powerful, and ever watchful. It arched through the sky, guarded by Heimdall, the shining sentinel whose ears could hear grass grow, and whose eyes missed nothing. They made this path strong but vulnerable, for it could be broken. But only at the end of days, below Midgard, they shaped other worlds. To the east lay Jotunheim, where the giants retreated after Ymir's fall, rugged, storm-tossed, and dangerous. To the south burned Muspelheim, still ruled by Surtra, who waited with his flaming sword for the final war. To the north, Niflheim remained a realm of ice, mist, and death. There, deep beneath, they created Helheim, ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki, who welcomed the dead that did not die in battle. To the west, Vanaheim, home of the Vanir gods of fertility, sea, and magic. In the heavens shimmered Alfheim, land of the light elves, and in the dark crevices below, Svartalfheim, realm of dwarves and blacksmiths, born of stone and flame. 9 worlds, 9 realms, all turning around one central truth. At the center of all, they planted a tree, not just a tree, but Yggdrasil. Its branches stretched over the heavens. Its roots pierced the depths of Helheim and drank from sacred wells. It was the spine of creation, the breath between breaths. At one of its roots sat the well of Ur, where 3 women, ancient and eternal, drew water to nourish the tree. They were the Norns, Urdur the past, Verdandi the present, and Skuld the future. They did not rule fate, they wove it. For God, for men, for monsters. Their threads ran everywhere, into every life, every choice, every breath. Even Odin respected their power. At another root flowed Mimisbrunner, the well of wisdom, guarded by the head of Mimir, the wise. Odin, seeking knowledge beyond all others, once gave his eye to drink from this well, and it is why he sees what others cannot. The third root reached into Niflheim, where the dragon Nidhogger gnawed endlessly, trying to bring the tree down. He was not alone. Squirrels and eagles, serpents and wolves, all lived along the branches of Yggdrasil, whispering, quarreling, watching. And so, the world was not perfect, but it was alive, balanced, breathing, and for a time, peaceful. The gods settled into their roles. Thor, son of Odin, wielded Mjolnir, the thunder hammer, protector of Midgard. Tyr, god of law and sacrifice, brought judgment to the halls. Freyja, goddess of beauty and war, led fallen warriors to her field. Folkvanger, while Odin chose others for Valhalla, they lived, they laughed, they built and ruled and dreamed. But deep in Odin's heart, the vision of a future came again and again. A final war, a burning sky, a wolf unleashed, a serpent rising, and gods falling like stars. He called it Ragnarok, but for now, he did not speak it aloud, for the world had only just begun. The rise of the Aesir, gods of order, when the world was young and the 9 realms still shimmered with the dew of creation. The gods awakened not all at once, but slowly, like stars finding their place in the sky. They were not born of time. They were born of intention, from the blood of Bor and Bestla, and the strength of Odin. The first divine order took shape. They called themselves the Aesir. They did not rule because they could, but because they must. In a world born from the corpse of chaos, there needed to be guardians' beacons to stand between fire and frost, between man and beast, between fate and destruction. And so they rose. At the heart of their realm, high above Midgard, was Asgard, a citadel of gold and stone, ringed by walls so high even the giants dared not scale them. Its gates open to shining halls, quiet gardens, and halls filled with laughter, steel and prophecy, and in its center stood Valaskjalf, the high hall of Odin, crowned with a roof of silver and seat of vision. Odin, All-Father, ruled not by decree, but by knowledge. His eye, traded for wisdom, now sat beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, forever watching, forever whispering. He did not see as men saw. He saw the weaving of fate, the gentle turn of each thread on the loom of the Norns. He saw the end, even as the beginning unfolded, but he spoke little of it. Instead, he built. By Odin's side was Frigg, his wife, queen of Asgard and mistress of foresight. She knew much, yet said little, her silence more powerful than prophecy. Frigg's halls were wide and still. She spun clouds into veils, wrapped words in mystery, and watched the fate of her children unfold with quiet sorrow. Among her sons was Balder, the shining god, fair and beloved, whose very presence seemed to soften stone. Light clung to him. Even the darkest corners of Asgard could not resist his warmth. But light, Odin knew, does not last forever. There was Thor, son of Odin, but not of Frigg, a god of thunder, war, and storm. His red beard and booming laugh shook the halls. His hammer, Mjolnir, forged by dwarves in the molten heart of Svartalfheim, returned to his hand as surely as night followed day. Thor was no poet. He did not speak in riddles. He spoke in blows. But he loved deeply his people, his wife Sif, and the world of Midgard, which he protected as fiercely as any father would a child. His steps thundered across the bridge of Bifrost like rolling sky. He was strength not just of body, but of loyalty. Then there was Tyr, the one-handed god of law and bravery. He was solemn, quiet, deliberate. Not many followed him in revelry, but all turned to him in need. He did not flinch before pain. He did not run from truth. In times to come, he would sacrifice his hand to preserve peace. But even now, in the early days of Asgard, his presence stood like an oath carved in stone. The Aesir were not alone in their halls. There was Idun, the keeper of the golden apples that kept the gods young. Without her, even immortals would fade. She moved gently, never far from her garden, where trees bore fruit not from soil, but from song and memory. And there was Bragi, the poet god, her husband, his beard white as snow, voice smooth as rivers, words flowing with wisdom few could rival. There was Heimdall, the watcher of Bifrost, born of 9 mothers, eyes sharper than falcons, ears keener than wolves. He slept less than any, and never truly rested. And Hera, goddess of healing, who knew the name of every herb and the pulse of every star. There were many more gods of truth, of sea, of silence, of seed and fire and forge. Each had a purpose, each had a part, but one among them did not belong. Loki. His origins were strange, born of giants, yet walking among gods. He was quick, charming, clever. His eyes flickered like candlelight, beautiful, yet never still. He made the gods laugh. He made them gifts. He saved them. Sometimes. He endangered them. Often. Loki was not evil. Not yet. But he was restless. And restlessness in a world built on order was a seed no one noticed until it was too late. The Aesir built not just walls, but order. They met in the great hall, Gladsheim, where they sat upon 12 golden thrones to speak of justice, law, and destiny. They crafted treaties with elves, dwarves, and even some giants seeking peace where war had once burned. They traveled across the realms. They gifted Midgard fire, rain, and harvest. They wove runes into stone and sky symbols of power that bent the laws of nature when carved with care. But such gifts came with cost. To learn the runes, Odin made the great sacrifice. He approached Yggdrasil. The tree did not welcome, it did not warn. It simply stood. Odin took his spear, Gungnir, and pierced himself through. He hung from the branches for 9 days and 9 nights, wounded, without food, without water, swaying in wind and silence. He whispered no plea. He begged no comfort. And on the 9th night, as his vision blurred and the stars turned cold above him, he saw. He reached into the well of meaning beneath the bark. He grasped the rune, and in pain, he was reborn. Now Odin could speak magic. Now he could sing what could not be said. He taught the gods. He taught some men, and the world took shape beneath his voice. But fate is not so easily tamed. The Norns still wove, and even the gods could not cut the threads that ran to their own graves. At the edge of Asgard, the gods planted their weapons and built a wall. They smiled more often then, feasted longer. The halls were bright. But sometimes, when the wind was cold and the moon was low, Odin would stand at the edge of his balcony. gazing past the realms into the great dark between stars. And he would whisper, "I see fire. I see wolves. I see my end." He never explained. He never needed to, because already the air had changed. And in distant Jotunheim, the frost giants stirred, and beyond even them, a great sword blazed in silence waiting. The Vanir and the First War, long before the end of all things. Before the first echoes of Ragnarok stirred in the wind, there was a time when the gods themselves were divided. Though most songs speak of Asgard, the shining home of the Aesir, there was another realm, quieter, older, full of life and magic, not war and runes. That realm was Vanaheim, and those who dwelled there were called the Vanir, where the Aesir ruled with justice and strength. The Vanir guided by nature and growth. The Aesir built walls and spears. The Vanir grew fields and forests. The Aesir sought knowledge through sacrifice. The Vanir understood the rhythm of the earth by simply listening. But two truths, however noble, rarely sit together without tension. The Vanir gods were mysterious, even to the Aesir. They did not fight for conquest, nor seek power for dominance. They were guardians of fertility, love, and abundance. Rain fell at their call. Crops grew beneath their blessing. They spoke in whispers, not thunder. Chief among them was Njord, lord of the sea and winds. His realm stretched across waves and sky, calming the storms and bringing ships to shore. Njord had two children, Freyja, goddess of love and beauty, and Freyr, lord of sunlight, peace, and bountiful harvests. Freyja's power over desire and magic was so strong that even Odin once sought to learn her secrets, and that is where the cracks began. The Aesir had never truly understood Seder, the deep magic of fate and form. It was not like rune magic or battle spells. It was older, feminine, intuitive, dangerous, and it belonged to Freyja. When she traveled to Asgard, cloaked in gold and mystery, the Aesir were captivated. She taught them Seder. She charmed them with her presence. She earned honor, then suspicion. Some said she was too powerful. Others whispered that she could see their secrets, bend their will. And when distrust takes root in power, it flowers into violence. The Aesir attacked her, not with blade or seer, but with shame. They accused her of deceit. They tried to burn her 3 times. She was cast into flame 3 times. She returned unburned, unbent. They called her Gulveig, meaning gold drunk, twisting her name into insult. But she stood tall, and the Vanir heard of it. The Vanir were not quick to anger, but what was done to Freyja was not just insult, it was betrayal. They sent envoys to Asgard, demanding reparations. The Aesir refused, so the Vanir declared war, and for the first time in all of the 9 realms, gods raised arms against gods. It was not like any war men have known. There were no sieges, no kingdoms to burn, no slaves to take, only chaos between immortals. The Vanir called storms and rot, cursed fields and stirred beasts. The Aesir sent thunder and steel, runes and ravens. They were equally matched. Years passed. No side claimed victory. The fields between their realms lay wasted. Rivers ran black with magic, and the world shuddered beneath divine anger. Eventually, both sides saw that this could not continue. They met silent, proud, bloodied, and they chose peace, not with empty words, but with exchange. As a sign of trust, the Aesir and Vanir sent hostages to live among the other. From the Vanir came Njord, and his children Freyja and Freyr. From the Aesir went Hænir, a tall, noble god of leadership, and Mimir, keeper of wisdom. At first, things were quiet, but soon the Vanir grew suspicious. Hænir, though noble in stature, seemed indecisive. He gave answers only when Mimir advised him. Without Mimir's voice, He was uncertain. The Vanir took this as deceit, and so, in fury, they beheaded Mimir, sending his head back to Odin. Odin did not weep. He took the head, cleaned it with herbs, spoke spells over it, and preserved it. Mimir's head still spoke, still whispered wisdom. It was placed beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, where Odin could seek counsel until the end of time. The gods returned to their places. The war was over, and yet it had never truly ended, because from that war came knowledge. From that knowledge came magic. From that magic came fear, and from fear, Loki would rise. But that is for another tale. For now, the Aesir and Vanir coexisted. Njord ruled the wind and tide from Asgard. Freyja joined the Valkyries, taking half the slain to her hall, Folkvanger. The other half went to Odin. Freyr brought peace and prosperity to the lands, golden light and growing things, and in the sky. Bifrost shimmered in the roots, Mimir murmured, and in the distance, fate turned slowly like a wheel no god could stop. The first war had passed, but the world had changed, and the balance, once so strong, now trembled. Loki, the trickster, and the shifting tides. There is a kind of silence that lives between laughter and betrayal, a pause between trust and doubt, a space where even gods cannot decide if what they feel is joy or warning. In that space, Loki thrived. He was not born in Asgard. He was not shaped in fire or frost alone. He came from Jotunheim, born of the giant son of Farboti, a fierce flame wielder, and Lofi, a mother of shadow. Yet Loki was not like the others of his kin. He was slender, sharp-eyed, quick. His strength was not in muscle, but in cleverness, in the tongue that bent truths, in the smile that opened gates better left closed. He walked through Asgard not as an outsider, but as one of them. Odin had made it so. Long ago, the All-Father had forged a blood pact with Loki. Why? None could say for certain. Some claimed it was because Odin foresaw that only Loki could bring about the end, and therefore only Loki could lead them to wisdom. Others whispered that Odin saw in Loki a mirror of himself, a seeker, a wanderer, a question that never stopped asking. Whatever the reason, Loki stood among the Aesir, not quite friend, not quite foe, but always present. The gods laughed at his jokes. They gasped at his tricks. They admired the gifts he brought, some stolen, some earned, some accidentally unleashed. Once, he cut the golden hair of Sif, wife of Thor, as a jest. Thor, furious, threatened to break every bone in his body. So Loki fled to the dwarves of Svartalfheim, and from their forges he coaxed wonders. Golden hair finer than sunlight. A ship that folded like cloth yet held an army. A spear that never missed. These he brought to the gods as reparation, as proof that from mischief could come miracle, and they forgave him, as they always did. But Loki's nature was not still. He danced on the edge of every law. He tested the weight of every oath. He smiled in the face of doom, not because he did not fear it, but because it was the only thing that looked back. For Loki had secrets, and some of those secrets had teeth, far from the halls of Asgard. In the distant corners of the world, Loki found Angerboda, a giantess of iron will and quiet sorrow. Together, they bore 3 children, none of them ordinary, none of them welcome. The first was Fenrir, a wolf larger than mountains, with eyes that burned with prophecy. His breath shook trees, his howl split stone. The second was Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, a creature so vast, it grew until it circled the world and bit its own tail, coiled forever beneath the sea. The third was Hel, a girl of stillness and death, whose body was half living flesh, half decayed bone. Her eyes held no malice but no joy either, only knowing. When the gods heard of them, they were filled with dread. not because of what they were, but because of what they would become. The Norns had already whispered it. The wolf will devour Odin, the serpent will kill Thor, even as it dies, and hell will rule the dead who do not fall in battle. Odin, burdened with foresight, could not ignore the signs, so he acted. Hel was cast into Helheim, made queen of the forgotten dead, where she ruled in silence over those who died of illness, age, or sorrow. Jormungandr was thrown into the sea that circled Midgard, where he grew and grew, until even the gods dared not speak his name too loudly for fear he might stir. But Fenrir was different. He grew in Asgard, watched by the gods. At first, he played like a pup, but quickly, too quickly, he became something else. His strength was unmatched. His gaze was unflinching, and though he spoke no words, the gods felt in him a hunger not of body, but of destiny. They decided he must be bound, but no chain could hold him. They tried iron, they tried steel. Each time, he snapped it with a shake of his head. So they turned to the dwarves. The dwarves forged a ribbon called Gleipnir, made not from metal, but from impossibilities. The sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the breath of a fish, the roots of a mountain, the spittle of a bird. It was soft to the touch, but unbreakable. They asked Fenrir to test it. He refused unless one of them would place their hand in his jaws as a show of trust. Only Tyr, god of law and sacrifice, stepped forward. He placed his hand between Fenrir's teeth, and when the wolf was bound, when he struggled and found he could not break free, he bit. Tyr lost his hand, but Fenrir was chained, and the gods breathed easier. For now, Loki said nothing. He watched. He smiled a little, but deep in his eyes, something had shifted. Not rage, not sorrow, just distance. Still, he remained among them. He feasted. He fought. He tricked and toyed. Sometimes he saved them. When the builder came to construct the wall of Asgard, demanding the sun, moon, and goddess Freya as payment. Loki transformed into a mare and lured the builder's stallion away, ruining the bargain. From that union, Loki bore a child, Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse, whom he gave to Odin. No one spoke of the strangeness of it. No one questioned the boundaries of Loki's form. He was what he needed to be, until the day he would be what the gods feared most. For fate cannot be bargained with. The threads continued to tighten. The serpent twisted in his sleep. The wolf gnawed his bond. Hel's hall filled slowly, and in the great mead halls of Asgard, when Loki laughed too loudly or stared too long into the fire, the gods would shift in their seats, because they remembered he was not one of them. Not truly. He was a question, and one day he would demand an answer. The binding of Fenrir, fear of the future. In the early years of Asgard, when mead still flowed freely, and the gods still gathered beneath the golden roof of Gladsheim, there was already a shadow too large to ignore. It did not come from giants, nor from fire, nor from war. It came from a wolf with golden eyes and jaws wide enough to swallow the sky. His name was Fenrir, born of Loki and the giantess Angerboda. Fenrir had not chosen his fate, but fate had chosen him. At first, he was small by godly standards, large enough to startle bird, swift enough to chase deer, clever enough to recognize his name. He grew quickly. By the end of the first year, he could crack bone with his teeth. By the second, he could drag boulders with his jaws and outpace Heimdall's horses. By the third, he no longer fit inside Asgard's halls. But it was not his strength alone that made the gods uneasy. It was what they saw in his eyes. There was no rage, no malice, only knowing. The wolf saw too much, and he understood too soon. Odin had already heard the prophecies. He had sacrificed an eye for wisdom. He had drunk from Mimir's well, and in every vision, no matter how far into the future, he saw the same thing. A field soaked in fire, A tree, split from root to crown. A wolf, massive and black. Jaws stretching wider than the sun, tearing through the sky, and his own body lifeless, broken in the beast's mouth. Odin had never feared death, but he feared the unraveling of all he had built. And so, the gods made a decision. Fenrir must be bound. But how do you chain that which has not yet disobeyed? How do you justify fear as justice? The gods knew the risk. They called it precaution. They forged the first chain from iron, thick and heavy. They called it Ledingr. The gods approached Fenrir with smiles and flattery. Mighty Fenrir, they said, test your strength. Prove you can break what no one else can. The wolf narrowed his eyes. He did not trust easily, but he agreed. They wrapped the iron chain around him. He sniffed it, tensed, and with one sudden heave, snap, shards flew. The gods smiled uneasily. Fenrir only yawned. They returned with a second chain, heavier still, thicker than tree trunks. They named it Dromi. Surely no creature can break this, they said. Fenrir sniffed it again. You doubt me, he growled. But fine, let it be done. They bound him once more, and this time he struggled longer. He thrashed, rolled, bit, pulled. The chain groaned, then cracked, then snap. Again, the gods did not smile this time. They knew now this wolf was not of the same world as they. If they waited, he would grow stronger still. And so Odin summoned messengers and sent them to the land of the dwarves, Svartalfheim, not to forge a chain of strength, but one of cleverness, a chain made not from what is, but from what is not. The dwarves accepted the challenge, from the sound of a cat's footsteps, from the beard of a woman, from the breath of a fish, from the roots of a mountain, from the spittle of a bird, from the sinews of a bear. They crafted Gleipnir, a ribbon no thicker than silk, smooth and golden, soft as breath, and yet stronger than any chain. The gods returned to Fenrir. He watched them approach with caution. You bring more rope, he said, but this one sings like lies. They laughed nervously. It's not for punishment. It's a game, a test, they insisted, just a challenge. Prove to all how mighty you are. But Fenrir was no longer a pup. He had heard the whispers. He had seen the fear in their eyes. If this is only a test, he said, then one of you must place your hand in my jaws. To prove your intent is true. Silence. Even Thor did not step forward. Only Tyr did. Tyr, god of justice. Tyr, who knew the line between courage and cruelty. He met Fenrir's gaze, and without a word, placed his hand inside the wolf's mouth. They bound him. Gleipnir wrapped around Fenrir's legs, his body, his neck, and when he strained, he could not move. He thrashed. He roared. He bit down, and Tyr did not cry out. He stood, handless, blood dripping from his arm, and said, "It is done." Fenrir snarled, snapping his teeth in rage. "You betray me." He growled, "You fear what I might be, not what I am." The gods said nothing. They drove a sword through his jaws to keep them closed, and bound him to a rock beneath the earth, where he would wait. He could not howl, but his eyes spoke. They spoke of betrayal, of vengeance, of the end. And still, the gods feasted. They laughed. They told stories of how clever they had been, but some among them watched the sky more often now. Some, like Odin, stood longer by Mimir's well. Some, like Frigg, wept in silence when no one saw, because deep beneath the roots of the world, a heartbeat still thundered, not of war, not of hate, but of inevitability. The wolf was bound, but the thread had been pulled, and the tapestry of fate was beginning to fray. Balder the Beautiful, light that couldn't stay. There is a kind of beauty in the world that does not last. It comes quietly. It shines, not with fire, but with stillness, and when it fades, The silence left behind is greater than any storm. That was Balder, the son of Odin and Frigg, the most beloved of all the gods. Balder was not the strongest. He did not wield thunder like Thor, nor rule the sea like Njord, nor chant runes like Odin. He was something rarer. He was good. In his presence, flowers bloomed where none had bloomed before. His voice calmed storms. His dreams were filled with light. Even the sun seemed to shine more gently when Balder walked beneath it. Among the gods, he was joy. Among the people, he was hope. Even the giants, fierce and cold-hearted, softened when they spoke his name. But the world does not favor what is perfect, and fate does not respect what is loved. One night, Balder dreamed of death. He awoke pale, trembling, unable to describe what he had seen, only that it ended in silence and shadow. He dreamt it again and again. Each time, the light faded sooner. Each time, he awoke with sorrow in his bones. He told Frigg, he told Odin, and the gods gathered in fear. Odin rode to the roots of Yggdrasil, to Helheim, to the hall of the dead, seeking answers no living soul should hear. There, he spoke with a seeress long buried, long forgotten. He asked what fate awaited his son, and the dead woman whispered, Balder vil die. The hand that kills him shall not know its crime. His death shall break the sky, and the end shall begin. Odin returned to Asgard in silence, and Frigg, weeping, took matters into her own hands. She traveled the 9 realms, not with armies, not with threats, but with pleas. She begged everything in creation, every stone, every plant, every metal, every creature, every flame to promise never to harm Balder, and they all agreed. The wind swore, the fire bowed, the trees, the beasts, the diseases all made the oath, all except one, mistletoe, a small, pale plant, too young, too soft, too small to be considered dangerous. Frigg passed it over. It is nothing, she said, but nothing, when forgotten, becomes everything. When she returned to Asgard, she declared Balder invincible, and to test the miracle, the gods made a game of it. They stood in the field outside Gladsheim, throwing spears, stones, even axes at Balder. They bounced off, harmless. They laughed. He laughed, but one among them did not laugh. Loki. He stood in the shadows, watched, and wondered. He transformed himself into an old woman and visited Frigg. They spoke, and in her weariness, Frigg confessed the truth. All things have sworn not to hurt him, she said, except for one, a little sprig of mistletoe. It is too small, she smiled. Too young. Loki smiled too, and left. Later that day, Loki returned to the field, where the gods still played their strange, immortal game. He approached Hödr, Balder's blind brother, who stood apart, sorrowful. Why do you not join in? Loki asked. I cannot see. Hödr said, I might harm him by accident. Loki placed something in his hand. Here, a twig. Mistletoe, throw it. I will guide your arm. And so Hödr, blind and innocent, threw the twig. It flew. It struck. And Balder fell. The gods fell silent. They rushed to him, but no breath came, no light, only stillness. And the sky, for a moment, turned gray. Frigg screamed. Odin turned away. Thor clenched his hammer until the handle cracked. The laughter stopped. Forever. They held a funeral unlike any before or after. Balder's ship, Hringhorni, the greatest ever built, was brought to the shore. His body was laid upon it, along with his horse, his treasures, and the weeping of all gods. But the ship would not move. It was too heavy with grief. Only when the giantess Hirokin arrived, riding a wolf, using serpents as reins, was it pushed into the water. Thor lit the pyre with Mjolnir, and the flames rose, and the light died. But there was still hope. The gods sent Hermodr, another son of Odin, to Helheim to plead for Baldur's return. He rode for 9 days and 9 nights. Through darkness and sorrow, he reached Hel, ruler of the dead, and begged. Hel listened. If everything in the world weeps for Baldur, she said, I will let him return. And so the gods sent messengers across the realms. Everything wept. The trees, the rocks, the birds, even the fire. But in a cave, one creature did not. An old giantess named Thuk. She said, let Hel keep what she has, and she did. Some say Thuk was Loki in disguise. Baldur did not return. Hödur was slain by Vali, Odin's youngest son, born in a single night for vengeance. Loki was not punished. Not yet. But the gods no longer looked at him the same. His laughter was no longer welcome. His presence, a weight, and the end, now, was certain, because with the death of Baldur, the world had lost its light. Fimbul winter, the long cold before the end. The gods had seen many seasons, spring rains that kissed the meadows of Asgard, summer feasts that echoed with laughter through golden halls, autumn wines that stirred the leaves beneath the branches of Yggdrasil, and winters cold but brief, sharp but survivable. But this was not a season. This was a silence, a slow, creeping, irreversible ending. It began with a whisper in the wind. The warmth of the sun grew faint. The days stretched long without light. Snow fell once, then again, then never stopped. It was called Fimbulvetur, the Great Winter. But it was more than just cold. It was a forgetting. The first winter passed, no thaw, no melt, no return. The second came fiercer, darker. Wolves descended from the mountains. Crops turned brittle in the ground. Children cried, and the old died with their eyes open. Still, the gods said, this too shall pass. But it did not. The third winter arrived with hunger in its mouth, and the world changed. Men no longer hunted together. They hunted each other. Brother raised blade against brother. Fathers forgot sons. Mothers abandoned daughters. No one planted. No one waited. No one hoped. The snow muffled cries and covered graves. And from this emptiness, the gods understood Ragnarök had begun, not with war, but with isolation. The skies began to split. The stars faded. Bifrost, the great rainbow bridge that once shimmered between realms, now bore cracks, hairline fractures running like veins through colorless light. Heimdall, ever watchful, stood at its edge with his horn Gjallarhorn in hand. He did not blow it, not yet, but he watched, and he waited. In the woods of Midgard, wolves howled longer than the moon could stand. The wolves Skjöll and Hati, sons of Fenrir, grew bold. Skjöll chased the sun. Hati hunted the moon. And one dark morning, there were no more dawns. The sky did not light. The moon did not rise. Only blackness remained. And with it, fear. In Jotunheim, the giants stirred, no longer content to remain in frost and stone. They began to march. Their breath turned rivers to ash. Their steps echoed in mountains long asleep. Even Surtra, the fire giant of Muspelheim, lifted his sword, a flame taller than towers, forged before the gods were born. He did not speak. He only waited, and when the bridge broke, he would cross. In Helheim, Hel sat on her throne. She did not move. She did not smile. She listened to the whispers of the dead, growing louder, and the footsteps of her father, Loki, echoed closer, because Loki had changed, not suddenly, but like a river bends, slow and silent, until it breaks its banks. He laughed less now. His eyes burned colder, and the day would soon come when even the gods would no longer tolerate him. Odin climbed to the highest seat in Asgard Hlidskjalf and looked across the 9 realms. His one eye saw only smoke, snow, and shadow. He knew every face he saw, He knew who would fall. He knew how the end would unfold. Still, he prepared. He whispered to the runes. He sharpened his spear. He whispered to the dead. He summoned the fallen warriors in Valhalla, training them for a war that could not be won. And still he felt it in his chest. This was not a battle of swords. This was a battle of truth. And the truth was this: the world had grown too heavy with prophecy. No word could undo what had been promised. No spell could stop what had been spun. The Norns had already tied the knots. Some gods clung to joy. Freya sang with the Valkyries in Folkvanger, her heart heavy with the absence of Balder. Frigg wandered her halls, touching his cloak with trembling hands. Whispering prayers, no one answered. Thor sat in silence more often now, polishing Mjolnir, waiting for a thunder that would mean the end. Tyr, one-handed and solemn, watched the horizon, where the shape of a wolf moved beneath the snow. They all felt it, a kind of ache in the marrow, as if Yggdrasil itself was groaning under the weight of fate. And somewhere deep beneath the roots of the tree, the serpent Jormungandr began to stir. His body, wrapped around Midgard, tightened. He opened one eye and tasted the air. The sea shuddered, and above it all, the wind whispered one name again and again: Ragnarök. Ragnarok begins, the final battle. No trumpet called the gods to war. No sun lit the path to the battlefield. Only silence and the sound of something ancient breaking. It began with a scream, but not from a man, not from a god, from the tree, Yggdrasil. The great ash tree that held the 9 realms shuddered. Its branches cracked. Its roots bled sap darker than night. And from its lowest root, the dragon Nidhogger tore free at last. Wings soaked in rot, fangs ready for a world finally ripe for ruin. The tree no longer whispered fate. It screamed it. In Midgard, the sea rose, not with tide, with serpent. Jormungandr, the world serpent, uncoiled from his eternal circle. His body churned the oceans into blackness. His breath poisoned the sky. Lightning flashed along his scales as he reared up, stretching from sea to stars. And with a roar that split the world in two, he called Thor in Asgard. Heimdall lifted the great horn Gjallarhorn to his lips, and he blew. The sound echoed across the realms, through every bone, every stone, every thread of fate. The gods rose. The gates opened. The end had come. From Helheim, Loki emerged no longer the smiling trickster, but a god of fury and grief, vengeance and betrayal. At his side walked his children, Hel, cloaked in shadow, her face half beauty, half bone, Jormungandr, who towered across the oceans, and Fenrir, the great wolf, whose eyes burned with the betrayal he never forgot. Loki led an army of the dead, pale and silent, marching under skies that no longer held light. They crossed Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, and Bifrost broke. The giants came next, storming from Jotunheim, their spears the size of pine trees, their footsteps shaking the stars. From Muspelheim, Surtur rose, his sword a wall of flame, his eyes like molten stone. He did not speak. He burned. The gods stood ready. Thor, Odin, Freyr, Tyr, Heimdall, Frigg, Freyja. Each held their weapons. Each knew they would fall, but still they fought, because the end of all things was not defeat. It was duty. Odin rode forth on Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed, his spear Gungnir in hand. He faced Fenrir, not with hatred, but with sorrow. They battled under a sky split by lightning. Odin struck. Fenrir leapt, and in the end, the wolf devoured the Allfather, just as was foretold. But fate does not play favorites. Vidar, son of Odin, silent and strong, stepped forward. With one foot, he pinned the wolf's jaw to the ground. With both hands, he tore its mouth apart, and Fenrir died, but so did the sun. Thor met Jormungandr in the ocean's heart. Hammer and fang, thunder and venom. They fought across land and sea, sky and storm. Thor struck the killing blow. The serpent collapsed, and Thor took 9 steps, then fell, poisoned, silent, gone. Tyr fought Garm, the blood-soaked hound of hell. They killed each other. Freyr faced Surtr. With no sword of his own, Freyr fell beneath flame. Surtr, triumphant, lifted his blade and cast fire across all worlds. The 9 realms burned. Even Asgard, even Midgard, even the stars, and then silence. The battlefield was ash. The gods were gone. The bridge was broken. The sky was black. The tree was falling. And yet, one breath remained. From the ashes, 2 humans, Lif and Yggdrasil, emerged. They had hidden deep within Hodmimi's holt, a sacred wood untouched by fire. They stepped into the light. Hand in hand, they would remember, and they would begin again. In the sky, Balder returned. From Helheim, he rose, light shining softly from his skin. At his side was Hödr, the brother who had once, unknowingly, killed him. They walked together. No vengeance, only peace. And Yggdrasil, though burned, though broken, it still stood, its roots charred, its bark scarred. But from a single green shoot, the world would grow again. After the fire, a world reborn. The fire had burned itself out. The sky no longer bled red. The stars no longer fell. The oceans no longer raged. Only ash remained. Ash and silence. But even silence breathes. And from that breath came life. In a grove untouched by flame, hidden deep within the roots of what once was Yggdrasil, 2 figures stirred, Lif and Yggdrasil, the last of mankind. They had hidden during the storm, in a wood called Hodmimi's Holt, where time curled upon itself and flame dared not tread. They had not fought. They had not prayed. They had only waited, and when they stepped from the trees, the world greeted them not with trumpet nor thunder, but with dew. The earth was soft again. The sun reborn rose gently over the horizon. Not the old sun, chased by wolves, long vanished. A new sun, daughter of the one devoured during Ragnarok. She shone with quiet warmth, and the 2 humans, the new Adam and Eve, stepped into light that had not been seen since the beginning. They would plant, they would build, they would remember, and from their memory, the new world would learn. Yggdrasil, though scorched, still stood, its topmost branches bare, its bark blackened, but from a single green shoot, curling between cracks, it began again. The tree of life, eternal, not unbroken, but enduring. Its roots whispered not of gods and giants, but of balance, of beginnings, reborn through endings. And the gods, not all had perished. From the smoke of destruction, some returned. Balder, the light, and Hödr, the blind, rose from Helheim, no longer cursed. They walked the earth, not as rulers, but as keepers. They bore no weapons, only memory. Vidar, who had avenged his father Odin, still stood silent, tall, unshaken. Vali, swift and young, watched over the new sun as it made its way across the sky. And far above, new halls were raised, not Asgard, something quieter, something wiser. No longer did the gods ride to war. No longer did they test each other in riddles and wrath. They sat beneath the tree. They watched the wind move across the plains. They listened, and they spoke in low voices of what had been, not to glorify, but to warn. The serpent was gone. The wolf, fallen. The fire had passed. But the memory remained, carved into stones, sung by streams, remembered in wind. Not all cycles must end in flame. They now believed. Some could end in understanding. Above it all, the Norns had vanished, their threads cut, their loom broken, but a new weaver had taken their place. Time itself, not fate written in stone, but choice reborn in each moment. A world not shaped by prophecy, but by what is done now. And so, the 9 realms were no more, but the world was still whole, a single realm, with new sky, new soil, and new hands to shape it. If you listen closely on quiet nights, you might still hear the echo of Gjallarhorn. You might still dream of thunder in the distance. You might still feel the hum of the old gods breathing through the roots. But fear not. The gods are resting. The world has remembered. And from fire, peace was born. The loom and the whisper of the gods. Long before the world knew kingdoms and kings. Long before mortals carved cities from stone and dared to name the stars. There were only stories. Stories whispered by wind, carved by time, and spun across the sky by the gods themselves. And in those ancient tales, where fate was sewn into the folds of clouds and woven deep into the heart of the earth, one goddess sat at the center of craft, wisdom, and war, Athena. She was born not from womb, but from the mind of Zeus himself. A goddess of intellect and invention, she burst forth in armor, crowned with light, bearing both shield and spear. But unlike Ares, who thrived in chaos, Athena ruled with order, every strike deliberate, every silence thoughtful. She stood not only on battlefields, but also in workshops, libraries, and temples, where minds thought, hands worked, and eyes watched with reverence there. Athena lived, and of all the arts she gifted humankind, there was one she held dearest, the art of weaving. To the gods, weaving was not simply craft. It was language. It was prayer. It was power. Each loom became a world, each thread a line of fate, each tapestry a mirror of the soul. Through the gentle tension of thread and spindle, the weaver translated vision into form, sometimes beauty, sometimes prophecy, always meaning. And in this art, Athena was supreme. None dared rival her, none, until Arachne. But we are not yet there. First, let us drift back into a time not marked by years, but by rhythm, the rhythm of the loom. Click, pull, click, weave. In a modest village beneath the mountains of Lydia, far from the thrones of Olympus and the fires of Hephaestus, a faint tapping echoed each dawn, fingers pressing, threads crossing, patterns growing like blossoms from the wooden frame. There lived a girl, young, quiet, with fingers that moved as if guided by memory older than herself. Her name was not yet legend. She was simply Arachne. She did not come from a noble house. She had no divine blessing at birth. Her father was a dyer of cloth, known more for the purples he coaxed from sea snails than for anything he said. Her mother had passed when Arachne was still a child. Some said she had woven in her sleep, her hands continuing to move, even as her breath had slowed. But in Arachne, those threads continued, and even in childhood, her hands found the loom with unnatural ease. The villagers watched her work with reverence. Her first cloths were simple patterns of leaves and birds, delicate and clean. But over the years, the cloth became more. She wove moonlight into silk, stars into wool. She captured the curl of a child's smile, the sway of grain in summer wind, the ache of loneliness beneath stormy skies. People came from distant villages just to see her work, not to buy. Few could afford it, but to witness. And slowly, the whispers began. She was surely taught by the gods. No hands could move like that unless guided by Athena herself. Surely, the goddess watches over her loom. But Arachne said nothing. She only smiled. Until one day, a traveler arrived, an old woman with eyes like river stone and robes that carried the scent of olive groves far to the west. She stood at Arachne's door, watching the young woman work beneath soft morning light. When Arachne looked up, she expected flattery. Instead, the woman only asked, "Do you thank Athena, child, for the gift in your hands?" Arachne paused, For the first time, she seemed to weigh her words. Then, softly, she replied, "My hands are mine. My skill is mine. I was not taught. I was not chosen. I learned with every hour I lost at the loom. If the gods had wished to claim this gift, they would have done so when I was a child." The woman nodded once. Her face gave nothing. Then she left. But others heard, and soon the whispers changed. She does not honor the gods. She claims her art as her own. Pride blinds her. Still, Arachne kept weaving. Still, her fame grew. And in the temples, priestesses began to turn away when her name was mentioned. One evening, the sunset settled on her fingers like silk, casting golden lines across her newest tapestry. A scene of Leda and the swan, delicate, daring. Her father approached, quietly. He said, "There are things even beauty should fear." She did not turn. She replied, "Then beauty is not enough." Word reached Olympus, through wind, through fire, through silence. Athena heard. She listened, and she waited. Because the gods do not strike in haste. They strike when mortals believe they are safe, when praise becomes pride, when gratitude fades into arrogance, when the loom becomes a throne. And so, as Arachne sat at her frame, drawing patterns from air and memory, the goddess began to descend, not in light, not in fury, but in disguise, because even wisdom watches before it judges, and hubris, like thread, must be followed to its end. Arachne, the weaver of wonders, in the quiet village of Lydia, the loom no longer sang. It spoke. It whispered stories. It mirrored emotions. It captured the turning of seasons, the longing behind silent eyes, and the beauty too fragile to name. And the one who sat before it, still young, still mortal, was no longer just a girl. She was Arachne. As the sun rose each morning and spilled across the hills, people would gather not to trade, not to sell, but simply to watch. Watch the way her fingers moved. Watch how thread became leaf, how wool turned to light, how images unfolded from nothing. Arachne's tapestries became something beyond craft. They became truth. One piece showed a field of wheat at dusk so vivid, the villagers swore they could smell the harvest. Another showed a mother brushing her daughter's hair, so delicately stitched that some wept without knowing why. But Arachne did not look for praise. She did not smile when they applauded. She simply nodded, as if to say, "This is what I do," and she kept weaving. When nobles heard of her, they sent riders. When priestesses heard of her, they sent warnings. When poets heard of her, they struggled for words, and soon, the question no longer was, "Have you seen Arachne's work?" but, "Is she greater than the goddess?" Arachne heard the murmurs. She did not deny them. When asked, she answered simply, "I do not weave with divine hand. I weave with my own. And if what I make is beautiful, then perhaps the gods are not the only ones who understand beauty." And though the words were quiet, they reached Olympus like thunder. But let us return, for a moment, to the workshop. It was a simple place. Sun-warmed wood, clay pots of dye, bundles of flax and wool hung like vines. The loom stood in the center, not golden, not grand, just well-loved, well-used. Arachne lived there. She did not seek temples or courts, only thread, only form, only silence, filled with the hum of focus. Her father, once a dyer of modest reputation, now spent his days away uncomfortable in the shadows of her fame. He did not understand her art, but he feared it, feared what it might bring, feared how the world changed when it looked at his daughter. And so he left more often, returned less joyfully, but Arachne remained, weaving. Visitors came in greater numbers. Some offered gold for her tapestries. She refused. "They are not made to be owned," she said. Some offered to serve her, to learn, to carry her name to greater cities. She declined. "I did not weave to be known." But one offer lingered longer than the rest. An elder weaver from a far-off land asked, "Who taught you such skill?" Arachne looked up. Calm, no one. It was always in me. And when the woman pressed, asking if Athena had gifted her hands their grace, Arachne answered, "Athena, no, I respect her, but I do not owe her." That night, as moonlight poured into her small room, she could not sleep, not from fear, not from regret, but from curiosity. She sat at the loom and wove not a story of mortals, but of gods. It began with the birth of Athena, a flash from the head of Zeus, clad in armor, eyes unblinking. Then the weaving turned to myths gods descending in disguise, falling in love or into jealousy. She wove Apollo chasing Daphne, only to watch her turn into a tree. She wove Artemis striking down Actaeon for seeing what he should not. She wove Zeus shifting into a swan, a bull, a shower of gold. Each scene, though rendered in thread, held clarity sharper than memory, not mockery, not devotion, only truth. In the morning, when villagers arrived to view the tapestry, no one spoke. Even the air stood still, because never before had someone dared show the gods as they were, not as they wished to be seen. Arachne watched their faces. Some were horrified, some captivated, some quietly proud. And somewhere, high above, a pair of eyes watched too, eyes gray as storm, old as cities, clear as judgment. The day passed, evening fell, the crowd thinned, and just as Arachne reached for a new spool of thread, a voice spoke from the doorway. Old, low, measured. "You weave well, child." Arachne turned. A woman stood there cloaked, face lined with time, eyes steady. "Thank you," Arachne replied. The woman stepped closer, studying the tapestry. "But you tread a path walked only by gods. You speak of them not with awe, but with confidence. Why?" Arachne shrugged gently. "Because I see them, and I tell what I see." The woman nodded. "And if one of those gods were to stand before you, would you still say such things?" Arachne, without pause, answered, "Yes." The woman smiled, and in that smile, something shifted. The cloak faded, the light changed, and suddenly, Arachne was no longer alone with a stranger. She stood before Athena. The goddess said nothing at first. She walked past the tapestry. She touched the loom. She ran her fingers along the golden thread Arachne had spun with such care. Then she turned. "You dare much." Arachne held her breath, but her hands did not tremble. "I speak only through thread. If I have said too much, then perhaps the gods should say less." A silence passed heavy, ancient. Then Athena spoke. "We shall see what you truly believe." Her voice was calm, but the floor shook, and outside, the sky grew darker. "I accept your challenge." When praise becomes hubris, in the days of old, there were many names for pride. Some called it confidence, some called it strength, some ambition, but the gods called it hubris. And for the gods, there was no crime more dangerous, because in the quiet space where mortals began to believe they were equal to gods, even the mountains held their breath. After Athena revealed herself, the room seemed smaller. The morning light through the window had dimmed, though no clouds covered the sun. The loom stood silent, and the golden thread in Arachne's hand dangled. Forgotten, she had asked, without knowing, for something that only gods and fools dare to desire, a challenge. Athena did not shout. She did not threaten. She simply stated, "You believe your weaving rival's mine. Let us both weave now, you with your hands, and I with mine. No priests, no witnesses, only the cloth will judge." Arachne looked into the goddess's eyes. She felt no fear, only something quieter, heavier, like standing on the edge of a great height, and without blinking, she nodded. "Let it be done." Word spread quickly. Though Athena had not summoned crowds, people gathered. By midday, the square outside Arachne's home had filled with villagers, merchants, and travelers. They did not speak. They listened and waited. Inside the workshop, two looms stood side by side. One, plain and well-worn Arachne's, the other, newly summoned, gleaming, tall, seemingly made of starlight and shadow, Athena's. Each woman took her place, each reached for her first thread, and the contest began. Arachne worked as she always had, silent, steady, focused. Her fingers flew, her eyes did not wander. She chose colors not for brightness but for truth, threads of deep blue for sorrow, gold for power, red for betrayal, silver for silence. Her tapestry began to take shape, not a story of mortals, but a mirror of the gods. She wove scenes whispered about in back rooms and temple shadows, Zeus descending in disguise, golden rain, a white bull, a bird, Apollo wooing, then abandoning, Poseidon raging in desire, Dionysus wandering drunk through broken fields. But she did not weave with scorn, she wove with clarity, not to mock, not to flatter, only to show. Athena, meanwhile, wove her own truth. A storm rose in her threadwork gods on high, poised and proud. She wove the contest between herself and Poseidon over the naming of the great city, Poseidon striking his trident upon the earth, summoning a spring of salt water, Athena planting the olive tree, symbol of peace, nourishment, and wisdom. She wove the mortal judges, choosing the tree. She wove herself, standing tall, serene, just. Her tapestry sang of divine order, of the rightful place of gods above men, and of herself, not as warrior, but as protector of balance. Hours passed, then day, then night, and still they wove. The villagers outside lit fires, but did not leave. Children slept in laps. Old men blinked slowly. Even the birds had grown still in the trees. For somewhere deep in the world, the loom of fate seemed to pause and watch. When the sun rose again, both tapestries were finished. Athena stepped back first. Her work glowed with precision. Each line of thread was placed with the care of a century. Each figure moved, alive in stillness. Her face showed no triumph, only silence. Then Arachne stepped back. Her tapestry did not shine, but it burned with something harder to name. It was beautiful, unflinching. Each god rendered without flattery, each story told without veil. Arachne did not apologize. She only said, "This is what I see." For a long time, Athena said nothing. Then she reached forward, and with a single motion, she tore Arachne's tapestry in half. The sound was not loud, but it echoed. A gasp came from outside the house. Arachne did not cry out. She only stood there, her hands open, the threads falling around her like ashes. Athena's face was not angry. It was something more complex. There was rage, yes, but also grief, and a deep, aching disappointment. "You have skill, child," Athena said, "but you lack reverence." Arachne lifted her gaze, and then, her voice low and steady, she asked, "Must reverence blind us? Must truth be hidden in praise?" Athena stared at her. The question lingered. It was not defiance. It was sorrow. Athena reached forward. She touched Arachne's forehead, not harshly, but with finality, and then she spoke. "You shall weave, always, forever, but never as a woman again." The room pulsed, the wind stilled, and Arachne began to change. Her arms thinned, her fingers split, her back curled, her body shrank, her breath caught. Threads spilled from her mouth, and in the corner of the room, a web began to form, soft, intricate, endless. Athena turned. She did not look back, and as she stepped out into the light, the villagers parted silently. No one spoke, and in the stillness, they saw a small creature now hung in the corner of the workshop, spinning endlessly, alone. And thus, the girl who challenged a goddess became something else, not destroyed, not erased, but transformed. A reminder, a lesson, a legend, etched not in stone, but in silk. The goddess descends in disguise. Before the goddess arrived in her radiant form, before the tapestry was woven and the world was changed, she first came, quietly, for even the gods, in their power, know that truth does not always reveal itself to thunder. Sometimes it waits in silence, watching. And so, Athena descended to earth, not as a goddess, but as a bent and cloaked old woman, her eyes hidden beneath a hood, her voice soft as woven linen. She did not come to punish, not yet. She came to see, in the village of Lydia, word of Arachne had spread like ivy, twisting through streets and hearths, reaching even those who did not seek it. They said her tapestries made grown men weep, that her threads could summon visions, that no one, not even Athena herself, could match her hand at the loom. And while mortals whispered in awe or fear, the goddess listened in silence, not to the praise, but to the pride buried beneath it. Athena walked the dirt roads without drawing attention. She passed potters and farmers, old women spinning wool in their doorways, children laughing as they chased crows from the fields, and always they spoke the same name, Arachne, some with reverence, some with warning, none with understanding, because none had seen what Athena saw, that behind every stitch of mastery, a thread of hubris had begun to unravel. She reached the edge of the village at dusk. Arachne's workshop sat bathed in the orange glow of the setting sun. Smoke curled from the chimney. Lanterns flickered inside, and through the open window came the sound of loom and breath, a rhythm steady and sure. Athena stood quietly at the doorway. She watched. Inside, Arachne wove. Her hair was unbound. Her eyes did not wander. Each hand moved as if guided not by thought, but by something older muscle memory born from lifetimes, not years. Her tapestry glowed with scenes both mundane and divine, and yet Athena felt no joy, because within every thread was a message. I do not need the gods. Athena stepped inside. Arachne did not look up at first. Only when the floor creaked beneath the visitor's feet did she turn. What she saw was not a goddess, but a stooped old woman, robes dusty from travel, eyes clouded with age. Arachne smiled politely. Welcome, elder. What brings you here? The woman replied, only to see what hands so many speak of. They say you are greater than any mortal, even greater than Athena herself. Arachne chuckled. I do not compare myself to goddesses. I simply weave, and yet you claim your skill as your own, because it is, Arachne said softly. The old woman approached the tapestry, tracing a trembling finger along the woven threads. You show the gods here, not as holy, but flawed. I show what the world shows me, Arachne replied. And if the gods disapprove, a pause, then let them come. The old woman turned. Her voice dropped, no longer weak, but edged with something deeper. They may do more than come. They may correct what has gone too far. Arachne tilted her head, curious but unshaken. What is too far, elder? To see clearly, or to say what others won't. To forget that we are small, came the reply. That the thread of your life is not yours alone to spin. The room fell still. Even the loom seemed to stop breathing. Then, Arachne spoke again gently, but with steel beneath her voice. If the gods do not want to be questioned, perhaps they should act with less secrecy. If they wish us to worship, perhaps they should give more than fear. The old woman stood tall, and in that moment, her shape changed. Her back straightened. Her hair grew long, dark, braided with olive leaves. Her eyes gleamed with stormlight. And in the hush of that modest room, Athena revealed herself, the goddess of wisdom, of war, of crafts, and of silence broken. Arachne stepped back, breath catching not in terror, but in awe. Athena said nothing at first. She simply looked at the girl not with fire, but with the weariness of too many centuries, too many fallen souls, too many stories retold. You had a chance, she said, to learn, to bow, to remember who you are. Arachne met her gaze, and I remembered, I am Arachne. Athena nodded once. Then she said, then let us begin. The loom of Athena, a divine vision. The loom stood waiting. Its frame shimmered not with polish or craft, but with the quiet gravity of the divine. It had not been carved by mortal hands. It had not been built with nails or tools. It had appeared, summoned not from wood, but from will. It stood tall, silent, and wide enough to hold the sky. And before it stood Athena, no longer in disguise, no longer in doubt, only present, whole, shining, terrible and beautiful. Arachne stood to the side, the light of the morning sun catching in her eyes. Her breath steady, though her heart now knew what it truly meant to challenge a god. No longer was this contest a matter of pride alone. It was balance. It was meaning. It was fate made visible. Athena reached out her hand. From the air came threads, fine as breath, sharp as thought. They shimmered with colors not yet named, the gray of battle smoke at dawn, the gold of wisdom unspoken, the blue of memory forgotten by time. She began to weave. No words were spoken. No mortals watched. But something deeper stirred. The air thickened. The wind hushed. The world tilted its ear toward that loom. First, she wove land, stone rising from water, oceans churning against cliffs, mountains curled like sleeping lions. She stitched rivers across the cloth, letting them shine like veins of the earth. Next, she wove life, animals emerging from thread, like breath stags with glistening horns, owls with golden eyes, serpents coiled in silver. Then came people, men and women, eyes wide, hands open, shaping, learning, kneeling. She showed them building homes, planting seeds, carving language into wood and stone. And above them all, she wove the gods. They stood radiant and strong. Apollo with his lyre, Artemis with her bow, Demeter scattering wheat from her palms, and Athena, not at their center, but among them neither louder nor lesser. She wove herself as teacher, guide, witness, the one who offered not demanded worship. At the heart of her tapestry, she placed a single story, the tale of her contest with Poseidon for the city that would bear her name. She wove him tall and violent, striking the earth with his trident. Salt water gushed from rock mighty, but undrinkable. Then she wove herself, no armor, only olive leaves in her hair. She stepped forward and planted a tree, its branches spread across the tapestry, full of fruit and shadow, strength and patience. The judges, mortal kings, chose her, and so the city became Athens, a gift born not from dominance, but from wisdom. Every thread in her tapestry whispered a truth. That power could be gentle, that strength need not roar, that gods, too, could earn their place. She moved with such purpose that even the birds outside ceased to sing. Arachne did not interrupt. She did not weave. She only watched, and for the first time, she saw the goddess not as distant or angry, but as something achingly deliberate. Hours passed. Athena's fingers never trembled. Her arms did not slow, and when the final stitch was placed, the tapestry stood gleaming. It was not boastful. It was not cruel. It was order, woven in light and law, grace and form, a mirror of what the gods could be when they did not hide. Athena stepped back. She said nothing. She turned to Arachne, and with a single, subtle nod, she signaled, "It is your turn." But in her gaze, there was more, not threat, not anger, but hope. Hope that the girl had seen, hope that pride had softened, hope that perhaps, after all, understanding had begun to bloom. Arachne stepped forward. She looked at the tapestry. She looked at the loom. She laid her hand upon her own shuttle and said, "Then I will show you my truth, the loom of Arachne, threads of truth." Arachne stood before her loom. The sunlight had shifted in the sky. now casting long golden fingers across the floorboards of her workshop. The air hung quiet, thick, the way it does before a storm or revelation. Athena's tapestry still glowed perfect in balance, noble in message, a tribute to divine order. Now it was Arachne's turn. She placed her fingers on the spindle, and the first thread whispered. It was not divine. It was not holy. It was honest. Her thread shimmered with a quiet defiance, fine, but firm, not silver, not gold, but something harder to name, memory. She did not hesitate. She began to weave. First came Zeus, not as king of Olympus, seated high upon his throne, but as a shapeshifter in the shadows. She wove him as a bull, luring away Europa with strength disguised as beauty, then as a swan, seducing Leda on the riverbank, then as golden rain, falling upon Danae, locked in her tower. The threads moved fast, bold and without tremble. Each image told not of reverence, but of desire unchecked. She showed power misused, wrapped in petals and starlight, not accusations, only images, and yet they burned. Next came Apollo, bright, proud, golden-haired, but in Arachne's tapestry, he chased Daphne through the forest, breathless, relentless, until the nymph, desperate to escape, begged the earth to swallow her. Arachne's needle captured the precise moment Daphne turned into a tree, arms outstretched, bark spreading up her limbs, eyes frozen in fright. Apollo reached, but never touched. She moved on to Poseidon, god of the sea, tempest and tide. She wove the moment he found Medusa in Athena's own temple. She showed the fear, the silence, the consequence. She did not explain, she only revealed. Each panel on her tapestry told a story the gods rarely allowed to be spoken, not because they were lies, but because they were inconvenient, because truth, like thread, pulls tight when left unattended, and Arachne pulled. The villagers who had gathered outside did not see what unfolded within, but they felt something shift. Birds took flight. The wind stilled. The olive tree in the courtyard leaned as if listening. Inside, Athena watched. She did not move. Her face remained unreadable. She had expected defiance, but not this, not beauty so clear, not truth so daring, not technique so flawless it rivaled the yacht's own hands. Because Arachne did not only weave bold content, she did so with perfection. Each fold of claw, each turn of color, each figure rendered with grace beyond her years. It was not meant to mock. It was not a satire. It was, instead, a mirror. And like all mirrors, it did not flatter. It reflected. And in that reflection, Athena saw not only mortal boldness, but divine discomfort. Arachne's final thread traced the edge of the gods' golden thrones. She stitched them not with grandeur, but with distance. She showed mortals kneeling, praying, sacrificing, and gods, far above, looking away. Then she finished. No flourish, no bow, only stillness. Her hands fell to her sides, and the tapestry stood complete. It did not shimmer like Athena's. It did not radiate law or tradition, but it trembled with something else, reckoning. The silence in the room thickened. Athena stepped forward. Her eyes scanned the tapestry from corner to corner. Not once did she look away. Then she turned to Arachne. "You have skill," the goddess said. A pause, but no shame. Arachne spoke softly. "What I wove was true." Athena's voice grew colder. "And truth, without reverence, is arrogance." Arachne did not lower her gaze. "Then let my arrogance speak. But let the gods answer not with punishment, but with reflection." Athena looked at her again, not as a goddess toward a mortal, not as judge toward sinner, but as one creator to another, and she saw not rebellion, but clarity, dangerous, necessary, and now irreversible. Athena raised her hand. The air around her shimmered, and the tapestry Arachne had woven did not burn. Athena let it stand. but her eyes filled with something older than anger. "You will not be forgotten," she said, "but neither will you walk among mortals again." Arachne took a breath, not of protest, but of acceptance. The goddess stepped forward, and with a voice like still wind across marble, she whispered, "If you would weave eternal truths, then so you shall, without voice, without rest, and without end." She touched Arachne's forehead, and fate unraveled. Her body bent, her limbs thinned, her voice vanished. Thread spilled from her fingertips, her hands no longer hands, her back no longer straight. Her form became smaller, darker, faster, a creature of web and thread, of silence and patience, of precision and exile, a spider, forever weaving, forever alone. Athena turned away. Her tapestry rolled itself in light and disappeared, but Arachne remained, suspended from the beams of her workshop, her eyes still watching, her legs still spinning, not in pain, but in purpose. And so the goddess left. But the world never forgot, and in every web hung in a quiet corner of a window, in every thread pulled tight by instinct, in every pattern born from air and stillness, there whispers the name, Arachne, the judgment and the shattering. The workshop stood in silence. Dust floated through golden shafts of light. The loom stood idle. The villagers had long since gone. And in the corner, where once a girl had woven stories into thread, now a spider hung, suspended in stillness, spinning with so grace. Athena remained. She did not move. She did not speak. She only looked at the tapestry, at the girl she had turned, at the consequence she had chosen. The tapestry had not faded. Its colors still held fast. Its stories still spoke. And for the first time, Athena saw it not as defiance, but as memory. Truth recorded, not to wound, but to remain. Her own image, woven by mortal hands, did not mock. It showed her planting the olive tree, yes, but it also showed her watching, judging, choosing. Athena stepped toward the tapestry again. She touched it, and it did not vanish. She had tried to destroy it before, in her rage, but now she could not, because it was real. And what was real, once woven into the world, could not be unmade, only carried. Behind her, the spider moved. Thread unfurled slowly from her limbs, pulled with exacting grace. There was no hatred in the motion, no revenge, only rhythm. Click, pull, spin, silence. Athena turned her gaze to the beam above, where the creature once a girl hung. She remembered Arachne's hands, how they had moved without hesitation. She remembered the sound of shuttle meeting frame, the breath between each stroke of thread. She remembered the girl's eyes, not arrogant, only certain. And now Athena felt something she had not known for a long time. Not doubt, not fear, but a quiet, distant ache, like a song sung out of tune, but still echoing long after the singer has left. She had judged, and her judgment had been perfect. But was it just? Was it necessary? The gods did not often ask such questions, but Athena was not like the others. She was wisdom, she was thought, and thought, once stirred, cannot be silenced. She stepped back from the tapestry. Her hand dropped to her side. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves turned on their stems. Birds circled above. The olive tree in the courtyard swayed, and in that moment, Athena understood something that even gods forget. That truth, when spoken not in anger, but in precision, is a form of reverence. That to show the divine in flaw is not always to mock, but to witness, and perhaps to love. She looked at Arachne again. The spider moved delicately across a web, now stretched from beam to wall. It was perfect, intricate, balanced, endlessly patient. It did not cry. It did not scream. It simply was. Athena felt no urge to reverse the curse. She would not. A goddess does not take back her decree. But she could carry the memory. She could let the tapestry remain. And she could remember. Because in that memory, Something greater than punishment lived. Something harder than power. Something called understanding. Athena turned. Her sandals touched the threshold. Before stepping out, she paused. She did not bless. She did not curse. She only said, barely a whisper, "We are not so different. You and I." Then she was gone. The workshop returned to stillness. The tapestry glowed faintly in the shadows, and the spider wove. Night fell gently, and the stories waited for morning. The curse and the transformation. The gods do not scream. They do not rage as mortals do when they cast judgment. It is silent, final. And so, when Athena laid her hand upon Arachne's brow and uttered the words that unraveled her, there was no thunder, no wind, only a hush, like the breath the earth takes just before it dreams. The curse was not shouted. It was woven, stitch by stitch, thread by thread, not upon a loom, but into the body, the spirit, the memory. Arachne did not collapse. She did not cry. She simply began to change. First, her fingers, once swift, clever things that danced across silk and shadow, now shrank, splitting, twisting, reshaping into long, spindly legs. Her back arched. Her arms drew inward. Her skin darkened, hardened. Her eyes still alert, still thoughtful, multiplied, deepened, widened into the silent, many-lensed stare of the weaver she would now eternally be. A hush fell across the workshop. The loom stood empty, and from the corner, a web began to grow. It shimmered in the quiet light, impossibly thin, impossibly strong. The first strand stretched from rafter to beam, then another, and another, until the air itself was laced with the language of thread. It was not the language of defiance, nor apology. It was the language Arachne had always known. Creation. Athena had left, but the room did not forget. Dust settled slowly, reverently, as if bowing before the permanence of transformation. No fire burned, no altar stood, and yet this was a temple now. A temple not to gods, but to truth. Outside, the village awoke to rumor. Some said a great light had been seen. Some said they heard Athena's voice. Others whispered that Arachne had vanished into the air, swallowed by her pride. But no one entered the workshop. They felt it in their bones that something sacred had occurred, that the threshold was no longer theirs to cross. Seasons changed. The door fell off its hinges. The roof softened under rain, and still the web remained. In winter frost, it shimmered like glass. In summer heat, it clung with stillness, and somewhere, high in the beams, the spider moved, not mindless, not cursed, simply spinning. Arachne did not die. She did not sleep. She did not hunger. She simply worked, each web a story, each thread a memory. She spun the sun's warmth into spirals. She shaped the moon's sorrow into lattice. She caught time like dust and let it go. She did not speak, but the wind carried her name, through hills, across rivers, into valleys where no god walked. Children whispered it when they saw the morning dew glisten across fields. Arachne wove this. Mothers smiled quietly at webs stretched across garden gates. She watches still. Even priests, in the silence of their temples, sometimes paused at the sight of a delicate web high in the corner and whispered, "We remember." The gods watched. They did not return. They did not lift the curse. They allowed, and perhaps, in their silence, there was a kind of reverence, because Arachne, once mortal, once proud, had become something eternal, not as punishment, but as reminder, a reminder that creation cannot be silenced. That truth, once spun, will cling even to stone, that even the smallest hands, when moved by certainty, can reshape the stories of gods. And so she spun, day into night, night into dawn, thread into myth, and in every quiet room where a spider builds her web, there still lives a girl who dared to weave the truth, not to insult, not to rebel, but simply because the thread in her hand refused to lie. The spider and the thread of remorse. Time passed, not in days or seasons, but in layers, layers of dust, of silence, of web upon web, and high in the rafters of a forgotten workshop, where once a girl had sat beside a loom and dared to match the gods. Now a spider wove with patient grace. She no longer remembered what it meant to speak. She no longer longed for cloth or color, but somewhere, deep beneath the rhythm of her limbs, memory still moved. Arachne had become function, but not void. She did not suffer. She did not curse. She simply wove, because weaving had never been a task to her. It had always been a way to exist. And now, she existed still. Her webs were not random. They were shapes of feeling, not words, not images, but echoes. One web trembled like laughter once shared. Another curled inward, like the ache of a quiet apology. Some glistened like water, others stood solid like regret. And no matter how many threads she spun, she never unraveled. The villagers forgot the name of the girl who had once challenged a goddess. But spiders came, to rafters, to garden, to the corners of temples, and each bore the same silent motion. The pull, the cross, the pause, the thread. Nature had adopted the girl's legacy, making it instinct. And in that instinct, Arachne had become not myth, but presence. Far above, on Olympus, Athena watched. She did not speak of it, not to the other gods, not even to herself. But now and then, when the air grew heavy and the world fell quiet, she would close her eyes and see the tapestry, the one Arachne had woven. It had not faded. Athena had allowed it to remain, stored not in halls of glory, but within herself. She had tried to forget, but memory is a thread with no end, and gods, even gods, cannot cut what has already been knotted by truth. One day, as the sky turned pale gold, and the world held its breath between two seasons, Athena descended, not in armor, not in light, just as she had before, in silence. She stepped into the ruins of the workshop. No one followed, no one knew. The walls leaned inward. The beams were old, but the webs were new, strung like lace from corner to corner, glowing in slants of sunlight. And in the highest reach of the ceiling, she saw her, not with judgment, not with sorrow, just recognition. Athena did not call out. She sat down on the floor. She looked up. The spider spun, and neither interrupted the other. They simply existed. Two beings once bound by challenge, now joined by remorse, not guilt, not shame, but the gentle ache of knowing that something beautiful had been lost by necessity, by law, by pride, and nothing could ever return it. Athena whispered, not aloud, but in her mind, "You were not wrong," and perhaps, in some instinct too small for sound. The spider paused, just once, then continued. The goddess rose. She placed a hand on the old loom. It cracked beneath her touch, and in that crack, a memory passed through her fingertips, of laughter, of thread, of a mortal girl who looked gods in the eye, not to defy, but to express. She stepped back outside. The breeze touched her face, and in the whisper of the olive leaves, she heard the loom again. Click, pull, click, weave. She did not look back, but she carried the sound. And far above, in Olympus, her voice grew quieter, not in power, but in understanding. What remains in the web? Time moved on. The gods faded from the lips of mortals. Temples crumbled. Altars were buried. Names once etched in marble grew soft with moss and rain, but the threads remained. Not the tapestries, not the looms, but the threads, thin, delicate, persistent, like stories, like memory, like truth, in the corners of homes, barns, temples, and forgotten caves. The spiders kept weaving. No one taught them, no one commanded them, but they did it night after night, strand after strand, always returning to the rhythm first born from a girl's fingers. They did not know her name, but they moved as she had moved. And so, Arachne's legacy did not live in songs. It lived in instinct. It lived in structure. It lived in the way every web captured light, and every silent corner of the world still held the soft curve of a spiral, eternal and quiet. Children, seeing a web glisten in the morning dew, would stare in wonder. They didn't know why, but something in them remembered. Not words, just the feeling, the sense that this was not just a web, but a message. Even in the grand libraries of later ages, when scrolls spoke only of kings and conquests, no page ever told of Arachne in full. She was a footnote, a warning, a mortal who dared, a soul who fell. But no page ever showed the beauty of her threads. No scribe ever touched the silence she left behind. Yet every time a spider built its home on the side of a statue, or beneath the eaves of a scholar's chamber, or across the gate of a temple long abandoned, the gods felt it, a quiet pulse beneath the noise of the world. A reminder that power once spoken without fear still hangs in the corners. Athena never undid the curse. She never lifted the thread, but neither did she strike again. She let the world remember in its own way, and when she walked among mortals in secret, as she sometimes did, she would pause at the sight of a web, at the feeling it carried, at the lesson it whispered. Truth, even soft as silk, has weight, and art, even spun in solitude, survives the gods. Some say Arachne still weaves beneath the stars, not bitter, not broken, simply still at work. Each web, a story retold, each pattern, a thread of truth, preserved when no one else dared. And maybe, just maybe, she no longer weaves alone, because every spider that spins her silver dance in the stillness of night carries a spark of that first defiant girl. So next time you see a web, do not brush it away. Do not fear its maker. Simply look and know a story lives here, one of pride, of punishment, of creation that refused to die. A story still being spun, even now, even here, in silence.